Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Spunkshine, The Weight of the Ship. Spunkshine is the alias for one David Asma, an electronic artist from Wisconsin who you more likely than not have never heard of. This guy has his fans, but there aren't that many as far as I can tell. Despite a fairly impressive output, he's still relatively unknown. I discovered the guy through a Pandora recommendation a few years ago. I think his song Hypnonymous Strut from his debut showed up, but I don't remember exactly. It was something from his debut album. But anyway, something about this guy's unique style, blending all sorts of different sounds, captivated me. In fact, his debut album actually reminds me quite a bit of my own music. As much as I hate to say it, since he was pretty clearly using GarageBand and I recognized a whole bunch of the loops he used. But that was all the way back in 2005, and he's come a long way since then. He takes acoustic sounds, electronic sounds, whatever, blending it all into his own intriguing style of weird left-field ambient / big beat music, or whatever you want to call it. He's put out album after album almost every year, and I had all of them just kind of sitting on my iPod. While I'd heard his debut, Distorting the Hertzian Wave, and his third album, And Yet It Moves, quite a long time ago and really liked them then, it wasn't until this album dropped that I got the push I needed to finally listen to the guy's entire back catalog. After making it through all 8 of his previous albums, a feat which I don't really recommend doing all in one sitting, while they vary in quality, there's no denying the guy has a unique style that you're not going to mistake for anyone else, and his best work is absolutely worth your time. So, I'll go down his discography so far. This is probably where the methods what he used to make the music, i.e. GarageBand, is most obvious. But there's a lot of different interesting sounds in here, ranging from electronic to acoustic to whatever, and still maintaining a consistently intriguing mood. Provided you don't have extensive GarageBand experience like I do, then you'll probably not take any issue with it. This one's not quite as weird as he usually does, but I only recognized one loop this time, so that's a step up. This is where I think he really came into his own. It's both weird and immersive, and there's no loops that stuck out to me like a sore thumb. Probably my favorite album from the guy to date. Definitely check it out. Pretty similar to And Yet It Moves, but I think a bit more lighthearted. Personally, still prefer that one, but hey, this one's free on his Bandcamp page if you want. This one's continuing in the more lighthearted direction here, and in my opinion, pulls it off much better. Like, he's really starting to live up to his name here. This one goes in a more experimental and difficult direction, and it's definitely interesting to say the least, but I don't know. I didn't really like this one, to be honest. This one was a return to form, though. While it's nothing particularly new from the guy, it's pretty solid overall. I think there's more acoustic guitars in this one than usual. This one was darker and more laid back than I expected, but pretty cool nonetheless. I'm reminded a tiny bit of like a FSOL here. Which brings us here, Spunkshine's 9th album to date. So yeah, the guy's catalog isn't solid gold, but the guy definitely has some pretty awesome stuff, And Yet It Moves and Huge Humans being my favorites leading up to this new release. While admittedly his music never stuck out to me as that weird at first, as I thought about him more and more, I started to realize he was just as weird as he was advertising himself to be. Would he make something more ambient, something more up-tempo, something lighthearted and silly, or dark and brooding, something acoustic or electronic? He could do any of that. And no album seemed to particularly dictate where he'd focus. He was this weird mishmash of everything that was near impossible to put my finger on. So going into The Weight of the Ship, I had absolutely no expectations. I could get basically anything. Maybe even not even a consistent style or sound all the way through. Although I at least kind of hoped there would be. So I plopped it on, gave it a good couple listens. How did it turn out? Well, if I were to judge the album based on its first track, Adjusting the Slack, I'd have thought this would be a return to the more lighthearted, with its acoustic guitar loop that heavily reminds me of the main hub world theme from Super Mario Sunshine. But the rest of the album does not sound anything like that. The rest of the album is surprisingly on the more serious side of Spunkshine. On top of that, I think a little more electronic as well. As for how good it is overall, while it didn't really strike the same chord with me as And Yet It Moves or Huge Humans did, nor did it really come off to me as a weaker installment like El Gordo or A Declared State of Belligerence. Granted, a lot of his albums haven't gotten a ton of time to grow on me, and since I'm actually reviewing this one, this got a few more repeat listens than the others did, so I'm not entirely sure where I would rank this, but purely because of the repeat listens I've given it, I think this is one of his better ones. As you'd expect, it goes in every which way. Deliberately Asking Tractors is a more foot-tapping, up-tempo number with a breakdown that reminds me of DJ Shadow's The Number Song about halfway through. Tamed Thrombosis is a more intense ambient track with some very abstract beats, although it starts out more like some kind of dub reggae track you'd expect out of early Orb. Those Despicable Somnambulists is a more sneaky and mysterious track with a very minimal beat and some occasional little synth patterns, but also some nice warm piano sections too. A Slow Orbital Degradation is entirely ambient, basically one synth pad shifting through a chord progression and slowly getting more intense. I don't think this track did a great job of justifying its length. I mean, it's 8 minutes, could have stopped at like 6 or something, but it's enjoyable enough. Well of the Sky starts out with some dramatic string washes, sounding like they came out of some kind of suspense movie or film noir, but it does not keep up that atmosphere, bringing in some kind of funk guitar and turning into some very odd and off-kilter but maybe more up-tempo track, but ending all dark and ambient. Very unpredictable track there. Kill Your History is another more mysterious track, but more up-tempo, with some cool electric piano chords that call over to sounds from the ground ever so slightly. There's also a voice saying, "This is the voice of unity," which admittedly strikes me as kind of ironic, as unity is not exactly a word that would ever come to mind when speaking about Spunkshine, unless I was talking about his general lack of it. The voice of unity, he is not. But I digress. Extracurricular Backsliding is another more mysterious track, with a cool piano section in the middle that reminds me of Air, but has a lot of other cool ambient side tracks all over the place. Now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of this album actually does have like a sort of mysterious bend to it. Well, again, the opening track is an exception. I guess that sort of mysterious sort of feel it's got is something that kind of ties the rest of the tracks together. Anyway, Speaking with Remorseless Frankness is next, and if I may speak with remorseless frankness, this is probably my least favorite track on the album. Every time I listen to this album, I never noticed when this track happened, though at least when I'm listening to it out of context, it is just as structurally interesting as always. There's a lot of loops that don't match up their key, it does sound rather odd close-up, but yeah, not a particularly memorable track to be honest. The hum of Maximal Gloaming is notable for its use of a trumpet which seems to be playing something resembling a nursery rhyme tune or something, but presenting it as if it were some kind of atmospheric jazz tune or something. But then we get to the album's centerpiece, as it were, Music for the Needlessly Attractive, which, I believe is the first Spunkshine track to break the 10-minute barrier. This song also kind of passed by me without my noticing the first couple of listens, but it really does combine a lot of the sounds that set the mood for this album, being mostly kind of ambient, some nice bell hooks here and there, going off on a more distorted and lighthearted tangent about halfway through with some guitars and some electric piano riffs, but then going back to the more ambient side of things at the end, all maintaining that kind of mysterious atmosphere that this album seems to be going for. So much content in this track, and all fitting together rather nicely, actually. Probably my favorite on this album. And the ending, The Light from Dead Stars, is another ambient track, like a Slow Orbital Degradation, but maybe a touch darker, with some mellotron samples that sound like they came from an old psychedelia record from the Moody Blues or something like that. So, overall, this album is very strange as usual, not particularly interesting on the surface level, but once I started digging deep in what it had to offer, it started to reveal all sorts of weirdness that I didn't pick up previously. There's plenty to like here, and while it definitely took a couple of repeat listens to grow on me, I'd say overall it's worth checking out. Cool stuff. Guy could really use some more attention if you ask me. I'm overall feeling a 7.3 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.